like to call this meeting to order. If you take your seats, I have a few little reminders. If you would please turn off your cell phones, or if you have to take a call, please take it out in the hall. And if it gets too noisy out there, we'll get that door shut because it sometimes is hard to hear. Please, if you're coming to speak on an item, you'll come up, state your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. Try to keep your comments very focused on the topic at hand. And please know, responding to what other people are saying, like no catcalls, no cheers, that kind of thing. If you're the applicant, then come up. You'll be called up after the staff has made their presentation, and you will have 10 minutes as the applicant. If you're part of the community council, you get 5 minutes. So I think we'll just try to move forward here and keep this going tonight. I need approval of the minutes for April 10th.
Madam Chairman, I approve the minutes for April 10th.
You making a motion?
Yes, I
Okay.
move that we approve the minutes for April 10th.
Thank you, Carolyn. And a second?
Second.
Second from Adrian. Start with Clark.
Yes.
Matt? Yes. Thank you. Adrian?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Agree.
Amy?
Yes.
Thank you. The minutes are approved. The chair has nothing to report, and the vice chair isn't with us today. Anything from the director? Nothing? Thank you. So we'll move into our first item, which is an ADU at approximately 2324 Green Street. Kelsey?
So I'm Amy. I'm presenting for Kelsey while she's on vacation.
She picked this day, didn't she?
I think she did on purpose. So, so this is a request by AJ Waller. He's the owner of the property at approximately 2324 Green Street. It's for a conditional use of an attached ADU. This requires a conditional use approval because it's in an R1 7,000 zoning district, which is a single-family zoning district. The applicant's proposing to construct an addition, which will be sited to the rear of the existing single-family dwelling. This will enable alley access to the attached garage. The addition's approximately 3,070 square feet in size and reaches approximately 27 feet 7 inches. At the tallest point. The proposal meets all of the R1 7000 lot and bulk requirements in terms of lot coverage, and no special exception is proposed as part of the addition. It will be located in the ADU will be located in the northern portion of the basement within the addition. It's approximately 595 square feet, which meets the 50% requirement of the square footage of the primary single-family dwelling. The ADU is proposed to have 2 entrances. One entrance is located on the east elevation of the addition, and the secondary entrance is located within the attached garage. The west elevation has the parking entrances, and one of those entrances to the ADU is located within that parking. The northern and southern elevations integrate design features compatible with the existing single-family structure. And key considerations that were discussed within the staff report relate to the housing goals and within growing Salt Lake City Housing Plan. One of the goals outlined in the housing plan includes increasing housing options and diversifying housing options. The proposal's proximity to transit, as well as consistency with policies and guidelines in the Sugar House Master Plan. The project went to the Sugar House Community Council And also one public comment was received in addition to the community council comment, and those are included in the staff report. And again, staff is recommending that the commission approve the conditional use with the conditions of approval listed in the staff report.
Any questions for staff?
Yeah, I had a clarification question. It's probably just me not understanding terms, but so the plans are saying that the building in total is 2765 square feet, but then in the beginning of the report it says that, where is it, page 2 or 3 here? It says the addition is approximately 3,070 square feet. So, and then later it says that the addition, or that the additional stuff is like 595 square feet. So I'm trying to figure out how those numbers work.
So the proposed ADU is within a proposed addition to the single-family dwelling, and I believe that the addition to the single-family dwelling in total is the 3,070 square feet.
Okay.
So in total, that is the proposed addition. Of that amount, 595 of that is the proposed ADU.
Gotcha.
And
Go ahead.
this building, it meets all the normal zoning standards, so it seems like it feels like is it because the alleyway is part of the property? Is that how it gets under the 40% lot coverage?
In the staff analysis, it looks like Kelsey said that it met the 35% lot requirement, so I'm sure that's just based on the plans. I'm not sure what exact area they included in that, but the requirement's 40%, and I believe she said something like 35.5% for the lot coverage is what the proposal is.
Okay.
35.68%.
Yeah. It's fine.
Spit it out. Okay. Any other questions right now? Is the applicant here? Would you like to come up and speak? We're not going to force you if you don't want to, but, okay. Why don't you come on up, state your name for the record, give us salient information, and then we can ask you questions too.
Thank you, ma'am. My name is AJ Waller. I'm the applicant for this proposed house addition. Just as a matter of clarification, everything that the planning staff said is correct, but just to add a little bit of clarification, the 27 feet is measured from the bottom of the driveway to the peak of the roof, and it's the driveway itself goes down 5 feet. So the building's actually 22 feet tall. If you measure it from the yard, we call it natural grade, so where the dirt is right now. But if you look at the back of the building, the driveway is a sloped driveway, and it slopes down. So that's how they came up with that 27-foot figure, because the driveway slopes down 5 feet. So that's actually like minus 5 if 0 was the dirt, and then plus 22 above that.
Okay.
Do you currently live and occupy this house?
No, not right now. We intend to once we get construction complete, sir.
Have you been before this body? You look really familiar, and I'm just trying to spot why.
I have on a different matter, a different residence, approximately a year ago.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant? I just thought I might check with you over this question of the square footage.
Yes, ma'am.
Is the total 3,000 square feet?
Ms. Thompson was correct. It's 3,070 square feet. But, and also, as another matter of clarification, when it comes to, I think, sir, you had asked about the lot coverage. The way that the planners had instructed us to calculate the lot coverage was where the wall of the building comes down on the ground. That's what they define as the footprint. So there's a total area that's within those walls if you made an outline, and then there's the total area of the lot itself, and that 30, it covers, so The first part covers 35% of the total area of the lot, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand how lot coverage is calculated, and I'm just going to assume that the staff report is correct.
Okay. Any other questions
you.
for the applicant? Okay, I don't see any. If you'd step back, please.
Thank you, ma'am.
So I'll open the public hearing on this item. Judy, are you here for this one? Come on up. Let us have a card. Shame on you.
So the Community Council reviewed this at the Land Use Committee meeting, as we usually do. And prior to that, we have 4 trustees that live in this particular neighborhood around Green Street. And so I emailed them the plans and asked them to talk to the neighbors and see what they thought. And my own stepson lives right across the street from this house. And we didn't get any negative comments. I think the reservation, this lot is fairly large, and I can't read the tiny print on this report to know exactly, but I'm sure it's at least 50 feet wide. So there's plenty of space to add this, and most of it is in a second story, but it's, as he said, it's 5 feet lower than a normal second story. So I don't think it'll seem all this huge. The only concern the neighbors seemed to have was, what if every house on the block did this? What would that do to the character of our neighborhood? You know, and that's a good question, and I guess we'll figure that out. I think this is a creative use. His wife is from, I believe he said China, and her parents come and spend a good portion of the year here and help with the family issues, and hopefully they're going to have some children. And it's part of the tradition of that culture to, you know, have the extended family often in the same household. So this is a good way to add some space to the house and have a way to accommodate the parents when they come for a visit, instead of doing it in a hotel room. So we recommend that you approve it.
Thank you.
Questions?
Any questions for Judy?
Thank
No?
you.
Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on this particular topic? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring it back up to the commission. Do we want to have staff come back? Any more questions for staff? No?
Just real quick for staff, not necessarily directly related to this project. When someone applies for an ADU, is that ADU application for the property itself, or is it for the applicant who applied?
Well, I believe it's for whoever's applying for it, but the actual ADU, the deed will be recorded on the property. So if they sold the property, those requirements still apply to whoever takes over that. If they want to maintain the unit, then they have to meet those requirements. If they don't, then they can get rid of the ADU. But if they ever want to reestablish it, they'd have to do a conditional use process themselves.
I put an ADU in my house, and then I moved.
Right.
Does the ADU still stay there, or I just moved and decided to rent my old house?
Yeah, you have a legal ADU established in your property, but
then
those
because
requirements are still there for the owner
Because
occupancy.
I didn't live in the property, but I still have the unit, could I rent out? So if I put an ADU in my house,
Mm-hmm.
and then I decide to move, and I decide to keep my house, and I'm gonna rent my house out, can I rent my house and the ADU, or just
It has to be owner occupied,
has to be
so,
owner occupied?
yeah, and that's one of the registration requirements for the ADU.
And the city checks up on if it's owner occupied or not during the normal enforcement?
I'm not exactly sure how we will be enforcing that, as this is only the second one that's come through the process. I don't know that we've actually had one established yet, but I think we're working on a document for recording on the property. I don't know if someone else
There's-
wants to answer that.
No, there's a sample deed restriction that we've prepared.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Any more questions?
Madam Chair, I'm ready to make a motion.
Thank you, Amy.
Based on the information in the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission approve petition PLNPCM 2019-00037 with the following conditions. 1, the applicant shall comply with the registration process outlined in Section 21A 4200F of the Salt Lake City zoning ordinance. And 2, approval is for the specific items discussed and identified in the staff report. All other applicable zoning regulations and requirements from other city departments apply.
And do I have a second?
A second.
Can I ask one more question? Is that all right?
Sure.
Was it this applicant was the same one that did the last ADU? So we've only had 2 come before us and it's been the same applicant, or no?
No, that one was a different applicant. I worked on that one, and it wasn't this
All right,
applicant.
thanks.
Her name's Mary. I know her, actually, personally.
Okay. Any other questions?
Good.
Okay. Amy?
Yeah, I'm just going to make a caveat for the other commissioners. This is one of the reasons why I generally oppose vacating alleyways, is because now they're going to be using it for a purpose that didn't exist maybe 10 years ago. So I just wanted to throw that out there, and I vote yes.
Thank you. Brenda?
Abstain.
Carolyn?
Agree.
Adrian?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Clark?
Yes.
The motion passes. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the second item on the agenda, a conditional use and conditional building and site design review for the Red Rock Brewery Brew House. Hi, David.
Evening. Okay, as you noted, this was a conditional use application for the Red Rock Brewing Company new brew house. This is located by 400 North, 400 West. It is a brewery it's in the TSA UC, so Urban Center Transition Zone, and a brewery is a conditional use in that zone. The brewery does include a tasting room, but that's allowed as a permitted use since it's under the 2,500 square foot level. This project previously went through the TSA scoring process, so they did submit a TSA application, and that's a staff level approval if they get enough points to qualify for an administrative approval, which they did. However, they are requesting to go through the conditional building and site design review process, CBSDR, to modify some design elements of the building. Specifically, the length of blank walls, some of the ground floor glass requirements, and the street-facing entrance requirements, requiring doors on every street-facing entrance, and the facade setback requirements. So overview, this is the site. It's a vacant parcel, as I said, on the corner of 400 North, 400 West. It's about a half-acre site. It's located just to the south of, immediately to the north of it, is the Mountain West Hard Cider Company, which is classified as a winery, and then just to the north of that is the existing Red Rock Brewery. Zoning, it sits within a TSA area. Across the street is some SR1A, but in general that area has been developed along 400 West for a variety of light industrial, commercial type of uses. Some single-family residential, of course, to the west. So key considerations that staff was looking at, of course, any conditional use, looking at that neighborhood compatibility and impact. It's talked about in your staff report. And then again, those design modifications through the CBSDR process, the ground floor glass requirement, the street-facing entrance, the maximum length of blank walls allowed, and the facade setback requirements. So probably the bottom picture is most germane to the discussion. This is the south elevation, and there to the west side of that there is a portion of blank wall that is approximately 55 feet long. The maximum length of blank wall allowed in the zone is 15 feet, so they're exceeding that, but their focus is more towards the corner. I'll let the applicant talk a little bit more about the specific design. So they are exceeding that, the glass requirement towards the east side of that facade but it does leave a little bit of a void space towards the west side. This was included in your staff report as well. Our glass requirements are between 3 and 8 feet above the ground. So if you took that full facade of the building, they would be required to have about 508 square feet of glass. They are actually providing about 1,400 square feet on that elevation, just not in the area between 5 and 8 feet. It's more concentrated on one side of the building. Similarly, on the east elevation, that 3 to 8 foot ground floor glass requirement puts the requirement at 313 square feet required. They're proposing only 285 in the zone that we specify between 3 and 8 feet, but they have a total of a little bit over 1,100 square feet. It's just, again, concentrated more towards the corner, so they're creating kind of a focal point towards the corner. Staff analyzed this through the conditional use standards found in 21A54. It does meet those standards and complies with the criteria in the detrimental effects determination. Felt it generally met the standards for CBSDR approval, and we did recommend that some conditions be added to mitigate those design changes, specifically the addition of another entrance on the south facade of the building and maybe some artwork or mural on that large blank wall space to help with the street presence and pedestrian interaction and interest.
Questions for David?
So David, so that 55-foot blank wall is on the north, right?
South.
So
That is the south elevation. It
that's
faces.
the south elevation.
Yes, yes. The north elevation would be between them and the winery to the north.
Right, but then the north elevation doesn't have a 55-foot blank wall.
The design there's no specified design requirements for the north elevation. It's an interior lot line.
So it's just for the design review is on the south lot.
The street-facing
And so
elevations.
from the diagram, like the eastern part is all this glass, and then there's 55 feet of length of just solid brick.
Sorry, south elevation this is a south elevation. There's the glass, and then there's about a 55-foot space with
Okay, thanks.
different block material. Okay.
Anyone else? Thanks, David. Will the applicants here?
Yes. Trying to get their presentation pulled up for them. Okay.
That would be good.
It's showing up on this screen. Wiggle it just a little bit. No idea, Marlene. No, that's a different computer. Stand by for technical difficulties. Best laid plans.
Yeah, she has a special.
All right. Thank you, Marlene.
Okay, we ask the applicant to come up and be sure to introduce yourselves and speak into the mic so we can record it, and then you'll have 10 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Council. My name is Ralph Nagasella. I'm with the architects. I'm from MJSA Architects. Joanne Hansen, she's from MJSA Architects also. And then this is Bob Jensen. He's the owner from Red Rock. We're here in front of you to apply for this conditional use process, primarily because when Bob had purchased the land back in 2015, he actually met with the Salt Lake Planning Commission, with one of the staff members, Wayne Mills, who was a senior staff member, and made sure it was okay to do a brew pub, a brewery, and a retail goods establishment there. And at that time, back in 2015, it was a permitted process. From last year when we started in 2018, the Salt Lake Planning, they redefined the land use term, and this became a conditional use. So that's why we're here in front of you today, applying for the conditional use. And then with that, once we started laying out the building, we needed to, and through the direction of David from Salt Lake Planning, we decided to apply for the CBSDR application for because of some functionality, programmatic reasons, how the building lays out and things. At this time, I'll turn over the mic to Julianne, who will actually walk through the building a little bit, telling why we don't meet some of these requirements of the zone intent, of the intent of the zone, and how we plan on resolving those issues.
Hi. So I'm going to try to walk through each issue kind of one at a time, but they are kind of interconnected, so I'll touch on them multiple times. The first one is the length of the blank wall on the south facade, and also on the east facade. On the south facade, on this diagram here, to the west, you'll see there's an orange hatching. I apologize, that's quite light. But this is to delineate programmatically the use of the building. So where the blank wall is more of a very uses to the brewery function that are more of a private use and less kind of glamorous. And so it's kind of more of an informative reason that we're doing this. To the east, where all of the circles are, which are the brewing equipment, the fermentation vessels, that's kind of the focus of our project here. This is kind of the heart of the project. Overall, this is going to be Red Rock's flagship. They've been part of the community for quite some time and are looking for room to grow. And just to touch, and then up there kind of in the northeastern corner, that's more of our public area. So that's where our focus is on the eastern facade. And then this is just the second level, again, more function that is storage and use that's not necessarily the exciting parts of the brewery. So this is, again, the blank wall, and then addressing the ground floor glass. And so we have, again, to the west is just complete function, just manufacturing functions of the brewery. The ground floor glass, we wanted to kind of bring everyone's attention, knowing that we have the capacity to have this as a corner lot. We wanted to bring everyone's attention to the corner. And so this is where we brought in all of our glass, and we wanted to kind of be able to see that brewing equipment. It's the beacon. It's the whole reason we're creating this building. And then for the street-facing entries, it's more of a matter of safety of only having one entry, because we are wayfinding people to the public spaces. So because it's on a corner lot, we wanted to make it very clear where our entry was and where we wanted you to be in the building and experiencing it. And then to the setback requirement on the east facade. And again, this is just another view of the entry, how we're trying to draw people in. And we are oriented on 400 West, which is the existing established kind of thoroughfare of where the existing businesses are and the existing residences are. And so we're just trying to add to that and tie into it on the east facade. And then this is addressing the facade setback. You want to add something, Ralph? So we are, it's a 50% requirement to be within 5 feet of the property line. We are at about 48% currently with the design. And, but what we are doing here is with this large roof overhang, it is extending out into the property line. And so that roof overhang is at the property line, still engaging the building from above and kind of softening the facade with the wood. Then there'll be downlighting and illuminating that corner in the evening. And then also the grain silos are a very important function to the brewery, and they are a permanent fixture, and they are themselves within that 5-foot property line. So they are adding 21 feet of permanent structure that is part of the brewery into that setback. And that's all I have for you currently.
Questions for the applicant?
There's no grain in the grain structure.
There has to be.
There has to be grain in the grain
In the grain
structure?
silo, that's the safest way to store it.
Okay. How do you get it in there? With a roof like that?
No, there's the trucks come in with pumps and tubing, and Bob can probably speak a little bit more to the technicalities of that.
Okay.
They just attach a pipe and blow it in with air, so it just goes up a pipe and then falls
Okay.
into the grain silo.
Thank you.
And the overhang is actually functional as well because it protects the silos from rain and weather and so forth. So it keeps, the grain dry and, even though it's in the silo, it just adds an extra level of protection.
Cool.
So I have a question on your 55-foot blank wall. The staff is recommending a mural and a door. What are your feelings on that?
Sorry, go ahead, Bob.
Well, the door is always problematic to put a door into very expensive industrial machinery that, it allows access to an area which typically you don't want anybody having general access to. There's no real functionality to have a door come right into the middle of large pumps and, mechanical equipment and so forth. So, one, it wouldn't be necessarily used for service, it wouldn't be used for general entry by employees, and it would be just a door to have a door. In terms of the 50-foot wall, I discussed a little bit with Julianne and Ralph that we are more than happy to do some architectural features along that wall that we could make it a lot more interesting than just a 50-foot wall.
So that was going to be one of my comments is I kind of agree with this like non-functional door, just have a door. But I also think 55 feet is really long. And when I pay attention to how I react to a building that is just a blank brick wall, I, as a pedestrian, feel not welcome, even though there's this great glass corner, which I think is very brilliant and very much a draw. But those blank walls are problematic for me. But I don't necessarily always feel like a door is the solution. But I have seen projects that come before us that have some alternating architectural features within that wall that are giving it depth or giving it something interesting that then break up that monotony and do feel less uninviting as the pedestrian. And so you would be able...
We'd be happy to include something and create interest. Some of our programming isn't quite finalized, so there may be call for adding more windows even.
Yeah, windows are always good too. So that's good to know because that was going to be one of my things. Is like, is there something you think you could do architecturally that could break this up? That then we would delegate to staff to approve. But I'm not keen on it being a door to nothing either. I'd rather see something more visually interesting. And it may not be a mural. It may just be you have some different architectural things happening and you think that's possible from your end.
Yes.
We've already planned that, actually. We're going off of David's, off the staff recommend.
Yeah. So that's, okay, thank you.
Any more questions?
So I'm less concerned about the west wall, but on the east wall, you have like this beautiful glass and then the grain silos, and then for the area into the tasting room, you just kind of have a wall, or then some of the drawings seem to have windows, a window there. Do you follow? I'm just trying to figure out what exactly is there, and then what your decision-making was around, if you've got this kind of tasting room, why you're not featuring it more on that first floor with some way, instead of that solid brick wall between the grain silos and the door. And there is, I guess, a window here. So there is that window on that corner, which is on some drawings, but not on the other.
And is that oh, that's the sign sticks out.
Yeah, that's the sign that sticks out
Yeah.
there. And then the upper level, there is like open face brick. And then below with that blank wall, initially the thoughts were kind of when you go inside to the tasting room, you know, you'll have a view into all of the brewing equipment. So kind of more creating a stage was the initial idea. And kind of when you, like, just when you walk in, that becomes the beacon. So it's the beacon from the outside and then the beacon from the inside. And so it's more of like kind of a tavern feel initially. But again, our programming isn't 100%, and we're still looking to bring in more windows potentially.
What is the length between the grain silos and that front door?
The blank wall itself is, I believe, 21 feet, and then I think it's another 6 feet to the door.
And from the room inside the tasting room, that actually the heart of it is to be able to sit in the tasting room and then look into an operating brewery so that you can actually watch, you know, the brewers brew the beer and things being done inside. So that is really a key feature, is to actually have it as, that's the entertainment, if you will. That's the thing that's really fun to watch, is an active brewery.
Which I think is cool, and I'm a fan of your brewery and your restaurant, which I could give you lots of compliments, but for later time. But my just thought is we're looking at, you've done a beautiful job, I think, on the corner and kind of engaging that street. I mean, I'm less concerned with 4th North because you kind of go to the train tracks. There's a lot of industrial stuff. Maybe eventually there might be something there, but it could be a while. You know, and I think that will solve our time. It's more, I think, as 4th West is developing, right? And there's more people moving north and south. It seems like even for your side, you're going to have this tasting room that would be, you'd want people to see and know that it was there, and they want people to come in, when now it looks very much like a brewery, and I wouldn't know if I was walking down the street that necessarily I could go in there as a tasting facility. Mainly just because you have, I mean, that brick wall that's in between the grain silos and the door is just kind of blank in there. There's nothing from the street to say what is in there. But I do get why you're in there. Like, I get, you're not looking out at Fourth West. You're looking at what's going on. So that's my only comment.
And then the upper levels, that's our public communal space.
No,
So
absolutely.
that
I think from
opens up
inside the facility stuff, I'm looking exclusively from not your building, but from the outside of your building, right? Which is the angle that we look at it, at how the neighborhood kind of
Right,
looks at it.
we've been dealing with,
Yeah.
you know, some of the.
So I was just
issues,
wondering if they're programmatic or designed, like, I totally get, you got boxing and shipping and, you know, speak for yourself, but maybe the less interesting part of your brewery, but, which is fine on the back that you're just not showing. But it seems like the tasting room still is something that would engage people. And so I'm just wondering why that 21-foot stretch, or 27 with the wood, doesn't have any sort of elements that that engage people walking down Fourth West.
We could.
I think we can come up with some, some additional, you know, like some perforation, small windows that will give it a little bit more interest, right? In that one section, that 21-foot section to the south of the main entrance. And it'll give it a little bit more eye draw to show you that this is really, you know, maybe.
Or if there's a reason that programmatically you want to have a feel of a dark tavern when you walk in and you don't want windows, like, say that, and we can have a decision around, you know.
That was our initial intent.
That's our initial intent.
Was it to be more tavern and kind of like creating a stage, if you
know,
kind of here at the,
you know, you walk into the Republican, which is a dark black hole, but you walk into your restaurant and it's not that way at all. It just it's different from.
right, so that you
brand.
you have all the light coming in from where the brewing equipment is. There'd be a window through into the tasting room, so your light is kind of filtering through in from the tasting room. So when you're walking into the tasting room, it's kind of like that moment. You're like, oh, there's all my brewing equipment that I'm gonna see, and the action that's in the brewery.
I like the way it is.
Thank you, Brenda. Any more questions for the applicant?
What type of landscaping will you be doing?
I think you've had a couple of proposals here that I think is initially, but, we can,
I mean, we will be working with the landscape architect and creating drought-resistant plants that are in, in accordance with the Salt Lake
Zoning ordinance.
zoning ordinance and requirements. And, anytime you create a new building, you want to make sure that you're, being sustainability in mind. So we would like to make sure that they are hardy and don't take up too much water.
I have another question, since this is my neighborhood. Where's the parking?
So,
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead, Ralph.
Okay. So right now, we have, our parking is out on basically the street. We have 14 stalls out on the street. We're proposing new parking along 400 North there. It's a really deep park strip. We've met with, transportation, Michael Berry.
Yes.
Michael Berry with transportation. He said at least propose it. That's what we're proposing. We haven't gotten any resolution on that, but that's where we're basically going street parking. We are required to have 9 stalls, and we have 14. We have, I think there's
3 existing.
there's
and
3
then-
along Fourth North, which is a parallel parking. And then we're proposing diagonal parking along Fourth North, which is a very,
10
somber
additional.
street going over to the tracks. They have the same parking, same diagonal across the street. It's a very wide street, Fourth North.
Okay, so maybe this is a question for staff, but do we allow to count parking that is in the street for your use? Yes? Or no, David?
Yes, they are allowed to count the street parking.
Okay, thank you. And you're building all of that, right? That's part of your construction, okay.
What's the building to the south on the other side of Fourth North? What's that business?
I believe it's just a warehouse. It belongs to the church, and I believe it's just a warehouse, a storage warehouse.
So
They have a
it's
back-
not necessarily parking that's going to compete with when you're in business.
No. And they do have parking in the front and the rear, I believe.
Any more questions? Okay, we'll let you step back.
thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll open the public hearing on this item. Is there anyone from the community council that wishes to speak on this? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on this? Okay, not everybody rush up here. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, bring it back up to the commission for discussion. Do you want staff to come back?
Yeah, I just have like a clarifying question for David. So if we were going to move to approve with some altering conditions, as I read them in the motion sheet, would just leaving one, which is artwork, a mural, or other element of visual interest, striking 2,
Yep.
would that give you enough clarification of then for any modifications to the south wall and the east wall that you
Yes.
delegate that to you with just striking the door but leaving it open with one? One seemed to encapsulate.
Everything. I tried
Everything.
to make that encapsulate everything. So yes, that would provide the clarity
Okay.
needed.
More questions for David? Discussion?
Well, as I said, I'm actually not, I'm not comfortable with sort of a mural, an artwork, or some other thing that we are actually not seeing. I mean, if it's 55 feet and if it matters, then we ought to see it again. And if it's a big mural, I might not be very favorable to that, given what the mural might be or say or whatever. So I'm a little concerned. I would rather just kind of leave it as it is, because I believe that long wall is a kind of nothing wall, and people won't actually even feel it or see it. And then if you call attention to it by making some big light show or something on it, then it's going to be a lot more obvious. Because right now, when you would pass through there or drive past there, you would see the brewing equipment, I mean, what do you call those things? Silos or whatever. And that would catch your attention. And you don't necessarily want, from a design standpoint, something that is competing with that piece of work that's catching your attention. This is not a big pedestrian pathway.
I agree with Brenda. I mean, their design here is making an enormous focal point of that corner, and it doesn't make sense to have an entrance on that side, even from just pedestrian use. But then, yeah, that back wall kind of disappears to me.
I don't need a mural either.
Huh?
I don't need one, so.
I mean, maybe if we really want to increase the amenities, we have them put on there. Maybe we have them put something
Slap
on
a
the
big old
front.
logo
Well,
over
I
there
think
and-
the motion as it was written doesn't state it has to be a mural. It says artwork, a mural, or other architectural elements.
I mean,
So
But I
it
think the
leaves
whole
it
point of
open.
that is to call attention to
No, I
it.
understand your point. I just disagree that
If-
this isn't a design thing for me. This is like, I'm looking at this is how pedestrians relate to buildings and how I feel when I'm walking along a blank brick wall. Even though there's something visually very interesting on the corner, I think we could do they could do some very small architectural features that break that up, that aren't competing with the corner, and yet don't provide this like blank 55-foot brick wall.
But
So
I think
I'm not keen on, I don't care if it's artwork, a mural, or something other very simplistic.
my thing is with where it is located and where you would be going.
Yeah, but you said yourself, Matt, like this is, this is an area that is in a TSA zone, so we're expecting some foot traffic. And you said like, oh, in years, things to the north will change. Like, we don't know how this is going to necessarily develop in the next 10 years. And I want to maybe look at that becomes more of a pedestrian focused area, that we're having more people around there walking on both 4th North and 4th West. Because I don't know if then what the building to the south is going to stay what it is for 10 years, et cetera, et cetera. So that's my position.
Okay, anyone else?
Couldn't that be accomplished with landscaping? So we're not detracting from the building design, but we're designing to the
I
pedestrian.
don't
and
think
the
you can
pedestrians-
landscape a blank brick 2-story wall.
Well, I think you could. You could plant in front of it so that as you walk through, you're walking through a landscaped area that provides visual interest, that doesn't detract from the building design.
I'm ready to
A
make
motion?
a motion, yes.
Thank you, Brenda.
If I can find the motion, hold on. Okay.
And let's be, it's two motions.
Remember, it's
Two motions.
There are two motions, because one is the conditional use and one is the conditional use site design review.
Conditional building and site design review, which will thankfully be changing to just design review under
Thank
the new
you.
ordinance. But you'll still see a few CBSDRs until we clear those out.
Okay.
SPRs. Okay, let me give this a shot. So, motion. Okay.
The conditional use one will be easier first.
I understand this one, okay. Based on the findings and information listed in the staff report and the testimony and plans presented, I move that the Planning Commission approve the requested conditional use application, PLN PCM 2018-01008, for the Red Rock Brewing Company brewery subject. No, brewery, period. That's it, period. No conditions.
No conditions?
No conditions.
Second.
Matt seconds. Clark?
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Adrian,
Yes.
Carolyn,
Agree.
Amy,
Yes.
Brenda.
Yes.
Okay, now we need the other motion,
Okay.
since you're on a roll.
I'm on a roll. Okay. Based on the findings and information listed in the staff report and the testimony and plans presented, I move that the Planning Commission approve the requested conditional building and site design review application PLN PCM 2019-00255 for the Red Rock Brewing Company Brewery, period.
No conditions.
No conditions.
Second.
Matt seconds. Amy,
No.
Brenda,
Yes.
Carolyn,
Agree.
Adrian,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Clark.
I'm going to vote no because I do think there should be something, maybe additional landscaping or something, but it doesn't have to be like a mural or something attached to the wall. But I do think something should be on that side a little bit, so I'll vote no.
So it's 4-2 in favor of no conditions.
Passes. That's
Motion
passing.
passes.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay, let's move on to the amendment to the Marmalade Courtyards Plan Development at 326 West Reed Avenue.
Queued up again.
Yep.
It's a new thing.
We get Nanette.
A courtyard, yes.
Thank you, Chairperson. Bob Lund with Neighborhood Works is requesting an amendment to the Marmalade Courtyards Plan Development. This plan development was originally approved in January 2016 with 24 single-family attached townhomes and 6 condo units within 3 phases of development. The plan development was approved with 3 issues considered by the Planning Commission. The first issue was reduced width on the private street, lots which do not front a public street, and reduced front yard setbacks along the south side. The original plan development met 4 objectives of the plan development ordinance. These included the combination and coordination of architectural styles, preservation of buildings which contribute to the character of the city, eliminated blighted structures, and providing 20% affordable housing. The original project occupied 1.47 acres, and the amended portion that's proposed tonight is located towards the northeast of the project and includes approximately 8,000 square feet. The amended portion includes 8 residential units total, with 6 condo units on the northernmost building and 6 single-family attached units towards the south. This is the original site plan of the Marmalade Courtyards Plan Development. The original site plan really won't change that much, or actually won't change. The existing footprints of the building will remain the same, as will the number of units on the project, the percentage of open space, and the number and location of parking stalls. The applicant is proposing to demolish the 2 existing buildings along 3rd West. These buildings were originally proposed to be rehabilitated to accommodate the new units. The 2 buildings have been in disrepair for some time. Neither building is is located within a historic district, and neither building is considered to be historic. The original plan development elevations of the originally proposed rehab buildings included keeping the original brick on both structures and using rich light cladding on the proposed additions to the structures. The amended plan development site plan Looks the same as the originally approved site plan. Because the proposal is to demolish the two existing buildings, one issue for the planning commission's consideration is the front and corner side yard setbacks. The building is proposed to be built to the property line because it's on the same footprint, which is the same as the existing buildings. The second issue for the planning commission's consideration is that there are no operable entryways on the north facade of the condo unit, which is the northernmost building at the corner of 800 North and 300 West. The proposed elevations of the new structure are similar in design to the other structures in the same development, which are the townhouses located towards the south of the property. The two new buildings are proposed to have EIFS stucco facades with wood cladding. The porch facing 300 West will be made of steel. Along the east and north facing facades will be located awnings over each ground floor window. The elevations last submitted by the applicant included a ground floor fenestration of 23%. Staff is recommending a condition of approval that the ground floor fenestration meets the mixed use zoning district standard of 25%. Staff finds that the planned development with the proposed amendments meet three of the objectives of the planned development ordinance, that being a combination and coordination of architectural styles, the elimination of blighted structures, and providing 20% affordable housing. As such, it is staff's opinion that overall the project meets the intent of the mixed-use zoning district and plan development standards with the recommended conditions of approval. The recommended conditions of approval being the proposed building shall comply with the 25% ground floor fenestration along 300 West and 800 North, and the original conditions of approval shall be met unless specifically addressed in the staff report.
Questions for Nanette? Anything right now? Does your applicant have a presentation?
The applicant is here.
Why don't we have him come up? Thank you. Be sure to speak into the microphone and introduce yourselves, and we'll give you 10 minutes to tell us why you're asking for this. Yeah.
Pascal Meyer with Carpenter Stringham Architects.
Maria Garcia's NeighborWorks Salt Lake, CEO.
And I'm Robert Lund, Construction Manager of NeighborWorks Salt Lake.
I think Bob was going to give a history of NeighborWorks.
Okay, this originally, I guess it was 3 years ago, we came before you for this project. We've completed a portion of it, 23 units, and this portion here, original plan was to rehab the units. We had plans drawn, submitted to the city, ready to pull the permits. We bid the plans out, and the contractors come back and say, "What is wrong with you? Why are you not tearing these down?" And we told them that originally they told us we could not do that. So we went back in, met with the building officials, and they said, "Come here and let's see what we can do about it," because there's no value in the structures that are there. The integrity is nothing, and all we could do is encapsulate that, and you'd have a wall that's over 3 foot thick. So as far as our costs go, it is still cheaper to tear it down. We have to do over-engineering, because of its location, but we would have to do that even if it was, if we were rehabbing it. And all these units, all the new units that we're proposing will all be affordable units.
So also to share with you, the original intent was to preserve the units because I'm such a huge preservationist, so it breaks my heart that we have to raise them. But as we started to get into the bidding of the projects with contractors, it was becoming cost prohibitive and it would exceed the affordability. We're trying to keep these units under $225,000 for affordable housing. If we would have continued with preserving them, they would have ended up at probably 300,000. I don't recall what the square footage is, and so that's why we're here. The other option we had was to just raise them and put green space. But we know how important affordable housing units are to Salt Lake City right now, so that's why we're here.
And I'd be glad to address the two issues, the access or the fenestration. I don't see why we can't get to 25% on the one side. I think we're about that on the north side as well. The windows really were just driven by functionality on the inside with the spaces, the bedrooms, the way the unit's laid out. But I don't see an issue with trying to increase those. And then the access, the door on the north elevation. As you can see, there's a grading issue. If you have the elevations, there's a grade issue on that side, and it really became problematic to try and make that work with the layout on the inside of a functional unit. And these are condominiums, so they need a stack. And so access to the second floor would be really difficult from the north elevation. So we propose our access to be on the south-facing side of the east elevation, if that makes sense, to the two stacked condo units. And yeah, I really think it's just the functionality and creating efficient units, which is driving the window and the door issue on the street-facing sides.
Okay, questions for the applicant?
Can you address the setback issue and whether you considered complying with the setback requirements for the new buildings?
Yeah, we looked at it. I think it's 10 feet on either side. It would make it, I think, nearly impossible to create units, those two condo units, to make those work. But we were caught between, if you demolish the buildings, you have to build over the existing footprint. But if you build over the existing footprint, then you don't have complying setbacks. And so we were kind of torn between which one's going to govern here. Can we tear down and build over
Isn't there an easement or something behind where these buildings go?
An easement?
Yeah.
Like a utility easement?
Yeah. Is that right behind these buildings, or is it?
There is a utility easement behind the buildings. It runs mostly through the parking lot.
Yeah, the only utility coming from the front will be the natural gas lines.
No, I remember when this came through the first time that there was some constraints because of
Yeah, there's a
how that-
large drainage easement. I
Drainage
think it's an
easement,
old
yeah.
drainage line that runs through there. And if you look at the site plan, A001, you can see where that's located. And then that'll just give you an idea of the constraints we're dealing with here in terms of where the existing buildings are located, trying to create efficient units that work.
More questions? Any questions? I guess nothing more for you right now. If you'd step back, please, we'll do the public hearing. Okay, I'll open the public hearing on this item. Is there anyone from the community council who's here that wishes to speak on this? Seeing none, I have a card from Tiffany Price. Please come up, state your name, and you'll have 2 minutes.
Okay, hi. Tiffany Price. I own the commercial property that's directly south of where this is being built, and there is a 50-foot giant sewer easement that runs behind here. And some of the problems that happened on the rear portion of this project were the setbacks. They get a lot of variance for setbacks. And it's proved to be very intensive on Reed Avenue. It also just, some of the things were just abutting the property and just too constrained. And I know we're in a time of a lot of needs of housing, but most of the units behind me were sold at market price. Part of the agreement to do this was that you were going to keep the brick facades, which the parts that were built behind were not of the same quality as a brick facade or a brick parking lot. And one of the reasons they agreed to take that down, or to leave it, is so they could do that with the footprint. Because if they were to tear it down, which they had the option in the beginning to do, then they would have to abide by the setbacks. And everything is already pushed so far. They're building on a zero lot line. Yeah, it makes the units a little bit smaller, but really there's a huge profit that was made on those back units. They were sold at market, most of them. And so I think to put more pressure on the adjacent property owners without just considering what is a reasonable setback, and if they agreed to leave them, then they should pay the price to reinforce the brick and bring that up to code if they want to maintain that out of compliance footprint. Or if they want to build something new, then they should abide by current standards for the setbacks. And because it's just putting too much pressure on the adjacent streets and not having access on 8th North and on the other property owners around the area.
Thank you. Anyone else? Come up, state your name into the microphone, and you'll have 2 minutes.
Okay. My name is Wade Peabody. I own the property at 343 West, 800 North, so the backside of the property, where the 23 townhomes have already been built. And I like antiques and historic buildings, but I don't really see much value in those two buildings in the condition and the deferred maintenance and the dilapidation that they are. And I would like, in this day and age where we are more environmentally conscious, to build something more energy efficient than spend the money to reinforce what's there. To me, it makes a lot more sense to put that money into something better, more energy efficient, something better for the environment, and making better use of those resources. I am on the back side, and 50% of my east side butts up to their project, and 50% of my south property line butts up to their project. So we did have a lot of interactions. Of course, there's always problems with construction, trash blowing in. They needed to access my property to build retaining walls and retention ponds. And of course, with construction, nothing ever goes quite as planned, but these people acted with integrity. When a sub would leave trash on the property, all I had to do was make a phone call and it was, removed promptly. So I just had to bring it their attention. They seem to be a really reputable company or owner. So I would love to see the existing building in its dilapidated state, where to me there's no historic value there, to rebuild on the similar footprint, something that's very nice, very energy efficient and sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and bring the discussion back up to the commission. Would you like staff back? Any comments? Any thoughts? This is awfully quiet.
Trying to figure this out.
Do you want me to get staff back up here? Would
Yeah,
that
I
help?
guess so. Yeah.
Come on back.
So we don't have any plans of this project, right?
Site plans?
No, building plans.
We do have drafts of plans, but they've made changes since we've received those drafts, so I don't have updated architecture.
So we don't know, so one of the things I'm looking at is that in the front of this building, in the old building, there was sort of what we call an areaway. It's a kind of space between the street and the building front that is a dip that goes down into the lower level, and the lower level is a few feet below grade. Is that still the case?
That will be maintained, and you can see that
The section
the-
seems to suggest that that's what's going to happen. Yeah, right?
And that was my perception of it as well, is that it will be maintained. You can see that on the south elevation of the northernmost building.
Okay. Right.
I'm not sure if it will be the same grade as what it is today, but the appearance is the same.
Okay.
Would you like me to get the architect back up here? Would that
Might, might help, yeah, might help. to have
Would
the
you
architect.
come on back up here? No, don't go away.
Yeah.
This is going to take
A minute.
several people.
Just a minute.
It's going to take
Just 6
people, take a couple people here.
Thank you. So I'm looking at the elevation of the old brick building, and it had, two of the units are below grade in the front. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that would be the case in this one as well?
Yes, we're going to maintain that same approach.
So you're sort of maintaining the profile somewhat of the original building?
That's
From the
correct.
standpoint of the elevation?
They're 4 to 6 feet below grade.
And the building on the corner, I mean, that's 2 units stacked on top of each other?
Correct. Two
And do
condo
they
units.
have that same below-grade elevation?
No.
Okay.
So that'll be a slab on roughly the existing grade for the lower unit.
And how do you enter those buildings?
If you're looking at the east elevation, you see the set of stairs angling up.
Yes.
That is the access to the upper unit.
Okay.
And then you will step down to access the lower unit.
So the windows in this whole corner, I'm be blunt, the corner seems pretty blank of windows, and I can understand, partly I can understand why that's done. The wood across the windows, that's permanent wood. That's not like a blind or some kind of, something that moves or anything like
No,
that,
it'll probably
right?
be like a synthetic material that looks like wood.
Yeah.
Right.
But you really have those skinny windows there, right?
Yes, and those
Not
actually.
like a window behind it with something in front of it.
No, those are,
Okay.
skinny functional windows. Is that what you're asking, if they're functional?
Yeah, well, not functional, no. I can tell they're not functional, but I mean.
Well, they're not operable,
Operable, yes.
but they let light in.
But they're this thin up here and a thin down there.
That's right.
They're just two, they're one in one building, one in the other, right?
That's right.
One's
Yeah,
unit.
they're like a high window for a certain room in each unit.
Right. And so what is that room?
I don't have the floor plan. It may be on that end of the building, it's going to be. The floor plan. It's going to be a bedroom.
And the very corner of that building?
Oh, excuse me.
No, it'll be the kitchen.
Okay, no, that window goes into the living room.
Okay.
Excuse me. That's on the east end, yeah.
So without getting into too much detail here, I am concerned about this corner piece because I think it's rather blank, and it is the corner, especially if you're bringing it up to the corner, that is a sort of, and I understand why you might not want it to be played much, but it seems like, especially on the second floor unit, you would want to have more windows up there because people would not be able to look in because they're at least, on the second floor, 1.5 floors anyway. So it just seems very stingy to have just this long skinny window in the front and two square windows on the other elevation for that, and without, excuse me, is that correct? Not quite, not even that much for that side.
Okay, so I could see lowering the bottom of those windows,
Yeah, and I could just see making,
especially on the top unit.
especially in the top unit where you might even consider, where you would need to consider it. And what is that detail that sort of surrounds it like a picture frame? Is that just
It's like
on
a
the top
soffit,
or?
a simple cornice, a soffit element that sticks out. It relates to the design of the original 24 townhomes that are behind it that
I
have
see.
been built.
Okay.
It ties in architecturally that way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Concerns? A motion? They're struggling.
Are there additional concerns? It's a lot better than what's there.
So Brenda, is that a condition you'd want to build into a motion?
Well, I think that there was some condition that the staff had already suggested that had to do with
Ground
windows
floors,
there, so
but it
I
was
would go along with that one, yeah.
That is true, but the ground floor, the definition of a ground floor is in between 3 and 8 feet.
So
So
that
if
would
it's
be
the
captured
second
within that?
story, it
Okay.
wouldn't be included in that condition.
Okay.
I do think we're going to lower that second story window. I think that's a great suggestion.
Okay, I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Adrian.
Based on the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission approve petition PLN SUB 2015-00218 regarding the amended Marmalade Courtyards plan development with the conditions of approval listed in the staff report.
I'll second that.
Carolyn seconds. Any discussion? Amy?
No.
Brenda?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Agree.
Adrian?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Clark?
Yes.
The motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all of our public hearings. So now we'll move on to our briefing on the urban landscape.
Hi, I think I have met most of you at this point. I'm Laura Bandara. I'm the second half of the urban design team.
You probably need to get to the microphone.
Oh, you're right. See, this is my first time here. But I need to set up my computer.
Okay, take your time.
Wiggle it a little.
Just wiggle.
Help.
You got your mouse? Yeah. Okay. Be So as I said, I'm Laura Bandara. I am an urban designer and joined this city about 6 months ago. My background is in landscape architecture, and so one of the things that I'm eager to do is bring a more intentional approach to urban landscapes and public spaces in Salt Lake City. And so as part of that, I'm just going to give you a little presentation about what it means when I say urban landscapes. And hopefully you'll be entertained at the same time. So what is landscape? So this is written by Anne Whiston Spurn, who is a landscape architect who teaches at MIT. Landscape associates people and place. Danish Landskab, German Landschaft, Dutch Landschap, and Old English Landskap combine two roots. Land means both a place and the people living there. Skab and schaffen mean to shape. Suffixes skab and schaft, as in the English ship, also mean association, partnership. So these meanings are still strong in Scandinavian and German languages, but they have all but disappeared from English. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about landscape, the association between people and place, that relationship which comes about because of the way we shape our environment. So to start, I'm just going to talk about how landscapes create frameworks for cities and regions. So this works at the scale of geomorphology. So this is the Atlantic seaboard, and you see all the pretty colors turning into a sandy, I guess it's whitish gray on this screen. But that is the fall line, the fall zone. And what that literally means is that's where the waterfalls are. And as a result of all those waterfalls, where the Appalachian Mountains meet the Atlantic coastal plain, we have grown a megalopolis, a linear band of cities that, because of the time period when they were begun to be settled, they relied on water power. So those falls were the engines that made those cities grow. This also happens at the nation-state scale, and I'm going to take you to a brief video from a MOOC, which is a massively open online course offered by the University of Delft about Dutch urbanism, but I think this illustrates the point really well.
UK and Germany. Hello world, welcome to this TU Delft online course on Dutch urbanism. We are here in the Netherlands, European country on the coast of the North Sea, right between the UK and Germany. This MOOC is about our tradition of planning and designing for the public good. And this tradition stems from one basic historic fact, and that is that much of our country lies below sea level, as you can see here in this historic atlas. Much of what is green here is actually up to 4 or 5 meters below sea level. Now this means that we have to shape, design, mold our country in order for us to live here. We have to safeguard this public good, safety from flooding. Now, the Netherlands may not float, but it's easy for you to understand that for us it's very important that we do not drown. Now, this basic historic fact has led to a great collection of design, planning, and engineering feats. The Dutch have constructed hundreds of polders, which lie below sea level. It is this land reclaimed, and we build them so that we can live and work here safely. And the same goes for our cities. As you can see in this example, our capital city, Amsterdam. Now, it is very clear that its world-famous canals are the main structuring element of the city, and they are as much beautiful as they are functional, and they stand in this same tradition of water management. Now, partly because of this tradition, the Netherlands was also one of the pioneering countries for our profession, urbanism. And just one example of that is this, the General Extension Plan of Amsterdam, drawn up by Cornelis van Eesteren in 1934. And you see here in red, modern planning and design principles that were experimented with on this large scale for the first time. If you look at the form and the structure of the city of Amsterdam as it is today, you can still recognize these shapes. Cornelis van Eesteren, by the way, who was the first professor of urbanism here at our faculty. Now, this MOOC is not about water management or about the famous Dutch architects and urbanists. It's about planning and design for the public good. And we can do that for any public good. It's a way of thinking. And we're going to practice with 3 basic principles which we think are central to our profession. First, that there is a balance between research and design, as you can see here in this student project, in which an interpretation of the city of Haarlem was given on the basis of a research, a formal and historic analysis of the city. This balance between research and design is always there. A second important principle is that we think and work on multiple scale levels, from the region to the design and detailing of public space. And when a design is good, these scale levels corresponding, as you can see here in this final project. And the third and maybe most important principle is that we never see a design outside of its physical context. Now, we are eager to acquaint you with these principles, and we are eager to learn from your experiences too. So welcome to this MOOC, and please join us in the next 7 weeks.
So I have to tell you, I feel very constrained by this microphone. I usually like to walk around, but I'll manage. Huh? Oh, do you have one? Yeah, that would be much more entertaining. So that last point I want to repeat, that, and this is very much in the way that I was trained. When you look at design, you never see anything outside its context. And so that is something that, particularly as our city grows and continues to develop, I think it's increasingly important that we consider that context and how it affects people who use that public space. How do I turn it on? Oh. Can you hear me? Is this working? Yeah. Okay. That's much better. These same principles of landscape organization for cities work, or landscape frameworks for cities work in our very own Salt Lake Valley. And so, as you can see, this basin that we live in is surrounded by mountains, and we have this huge body of water to the north. As we know, in the cultural context of this place being settled as a city, the Morin pioneers were fleeing persecution. And so this was an ideal place because they felt secure here. No one was going to get in or out of this valley without them knowing about it. At the same time, because of the waters coming down from City Creek Canyon, we had the rich the floodplain soils, so generally good for farming. But again, I think that point about the security is reinforced by the Utah War, which never really happened as a war per se, at least not in this valley, because by the time the federal troops arrived in the valley, everyone had cleared out of Salt Lake City, right? They knew well in advance. that people were coming. And again, you see how our city is organized, right? We have the mountains, our inland sea, the Great Salt Lake, and the Jordan River. So this is 1891. Landscapes also organize cities at this, spatially, right? So this is Boston. Some of you may be familiar with the Emerald Necklace, which I remember my grandmother insisted that we go see in the snow, and she was like in her 80s and driving, so that was a thing. Anyway, so the way that these parks begin to give some structure to the very sort of, let's say, inconsistent grid of Boston. At the same time, one thing that's really interesting to note is the Back Bay Fens there, which you see by the Charles River. So the Charles River was a tidal estuary, and the Back Bay Fens was essentially a sewer for a long time in historic Boston. People just tossed trash, whatever they wanted to get rid of there. And they brought Frederick Law Olmsted in to work with that. So he was really, as one of the first, let's say our profession has a long history of being involved in infrastructure projects because he transformed this muck into, essentially a garden that would also flush out all the stormwater into the tidal Charles River. Subsequently, they changed the flow of the river, and so the system no longer functions as it did. So what is landscape architecture? So sometimes, because as soon as I got into this profession, people ask me for advice about their yards. I will say this. Landscaping does not equal landscape architecture, okay? There's nothing wrong with landscaping, just not landscape architecture. So this is landscaping, and this is landscape architecture. It's a estate actually now owned by the trustees of reservation in Massachusetts, and if you ever get a chance to go, it's just gorgeous. So in that question, the other side of that is, how do spaces become places? Because we talk a lot about open space, right? When proposals are brought to you and what that means. Or rather, we talk about it as a percentage or ratio. So the way I like to say it is that architects design identities for shelter and that landscape architects design identities for space, sort of at the most basic level. So here's an outstanding example of a designed landscape. I'm sure you're familiar with the St. Louis Arch. And again, this is a whole composition, right? So unfortunately, it doesn't read as well as I would like on these multiple screens, but you have the courthouse, set in the city at one end of the park, coming through to the Mississippi River. And this gateway is to honor, Thomas Jefferson's sort of philosophy of manifest destiny, right? And so the scale of it has to stand up to the scale of that idea as well as the scale of that immense river. At the same time, it connects the city and the river. Landscape architecture is intentional. All that landform is sculpted. That area, I'll go back quickly. You see a church kind of right above the lower leg of the arch there. That is what is left of the neighborhood that they raised to build that site. And literally, you still will find rubble in the fill, and it's a brick of one of the houses that was there. So there's, every site has a history. Every place has a history. But that landform, so Eero Saarinen, the architect who designed the arch, was actually a sculptor briefly. And so this landform is completely man-made. And he had this very intentional desire to sculpt that landform. And I will also add that Dan Kiley, the landscape architect, did not intend for it to be manicured turf. So experiences are designed. The pathways are lined with a double allée of trees that, as you walk along it, hide and reveal views to the arch. At the same time, procession is an incredibly important part of landscape architecture. How do you move through a place? So these are the monumental staircase, which is the name, and you can see why, that goes up from the river to the arch. And again, it gives you that sense of you're ascending to this place. At the same time, it's also, again, responding to that context of this incredibly large landscape, city idea of manifest destiny. The other, just aside, is that I did some historic preservation work at the Arch, and in a previous career, obviously, and I was looking at these staircase, and unfortunately, the National Park Service is underfunded, and there was a hole, you know, about yay big, and a little mouse just poked his head through it. So just the contrast of those two scales was amazing. So J.B. Jackson says that landscape is never simply a natural space, a feature of the natural environment. That's really important. When we are talking about landscape here, we are not talking about nature. We are outside of nature. Every landscape is the place where well, let me rephrase that. We're not outside of nature. We are nature, right? People are nature. So ants make cities, people make cities. And I can go into that more another time, because that's a whole other set of topics. So every landscape is the place where we establish our own organization of space and time. So here's a good example of that. This is the Steele Indian School in Phoenix, Arizona, which has been transformed into a park by Tenike Landscape Architects. And some of you may be aware of the history of Native American boarding schools where children were taken from their families, not allowed to speak their own languages in the school, you know, had their hair cut, made to dress in you know, Western clothes or non-traditional clothes. You know, it was very much a place of trauma. And so the landscape architects incorporated local Hopi and Navajo input into the redesign, and you know, alumni of the school into the redesign of this park to create a place where you could have a sense of reflection, right? That you could begin to see that landscape anew and begin to, rather than preserving it as it was and therefore sort of memorializing trauma, that you can reinterpret it while still preserving certain elements. And allow people to reflect on that history in a way that I think is more profound than if you just preserved the building and made no changes. At the same time, you know, landscapes serve a really important purpose of creating places of rest. This is a busy city in Boston, the Prudential Center Plaza by Mick Young Kim Design. And she designed these lovely poles with birds on them that flutter in the wind and have fiber optic lights through the base. At the same time, they've considered there's a variety of seating types which can accommodate different uses of the space. And they also do a lot of studies. They're looking to see what is the impact going to be of this intervention in the landscape. Landscape architects, again, help create identities for space. So they make spaces into places. So here's a good example. This is a little triangular leftover lot near the Viaduct rail line that Philadelphia wants to transform into sort of their High Line park. And they asked Walter Hood to do a temporary design to begin to envision the future of that space. And as you can see, just by suggesting edges, right, there's not full enclosure, it's not a wall, but they've begun to frame the space and shape the space. At the same time, this was always intended to be temporary and lead to a new space, to generate ideas and enthusiasm in the community. And that's something I think we could really benefit from here in Salt Lake City. At the same time, landscapes can stitch together different architectural styles when done well. So this is a small example that has an outsized impact. This is Tanner Fountain which is on the Harvard campus by Peter Walker Partners. And you can see those two buildings have very different architectural styles, and yet by creating that focal point of this spray fountain sort of in an unexpected place, I think it allows you to focus more clearly on each building instead of the jarring contrast between the two. Another important piece of landscape architecture and urban landscapes is that they reflect seasonal change. They reflect the fact, when an architect hands you a key to the building, that project is more or less done from their perspective. For a landscape architect, when you've done the plantings, that's just the beginning. And again, it's just a very, very simple palette of materials that they use. So this is my final slide, so thank you for staying with me. The final thing I want to do is say that one of the real, I think, things that we should focus on and think about in Salt Lake City is our urban edges, right? And that there are many things we can do to suggest enclosure or frame space without necessarily enclosing it, right? So this is a wonderful example in South Africa, in Cape Town, dedicated to Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who led anti-apartheid marches from this place, designed by a very well-known firm out of Norway, and they have offices in New York, Snøhetta, and Local Studio, which is based in Johannesburg in South Africa. But this arch, first of all, it has 14 members to, symbolize, I believe it's 14 articles of the South African Constitution. At the same time, the location is incredibly significant. This is the company garden. So South Africa started as, well, the Dutch began their colonization of South Africa by, using it as a trading post, essentially. So they would stop on their way around the Cape, gather supplies from the garden, and so that was 1600s, and since then this has become a very popular public space in South Africa. People walk along that promenade, and so again, to frame but also reframe that space to say this is a new South Africa, right? We recognize this legacy that we have, but we also recognize that we have the capacity to create a new future, a much better future. So with that, I'll stop, and I hope that you will all see me as a resource, and should you have questions or anything that I can provide for you, Molly and I are both working to integrate more sort of ecology and sustainability mindset into our approach to design, and really think about more creative and constructive ways that we can mitigate climate change through changes in the way we design and build our public realm.
So I have a comment. Are you working in the planning office?
Yes.
Because this is interesting when you bring up these examples. A lot of it feels very public art related. And we do not have striking public art that is functional, that frames a space. And I don't know what the role is for planning to work with the Arts Council, but it seems like that's a really good opportunity to help guide some of the public art in terms of what the proposal even says of what you're looking for. Right now, the public art we've had in our public places, especially in the parks, has been like, who's going to do it? Great, do what you want. And we don't really get this.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there's opportunities to merge those two, but I don't know how appropriate that is for planning office to do that. But I think we're missing a huge opportunity by not doing that.
So just to respond briefly, again, because my background is so multidisciplinary and collaborative, I just don't see boundaries. So I have been reaching out to a lot of different departments, and public art is one. And actually, I was just recently at the National APA conference in San Francisco and came back very excited about some ideas about integrating arts and planning. So I've already had discussions.
I get excited when I see that stuff, but we don't have any of that here.
Exactly, yeah.
And we're not seem to be getting it, so.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if we had stuff like that.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
Anyone else?
I just want to thank you for bringing all of this to our attention, and I want to also ask you and Molly. It seems like in our downtown, in particular, we're missing not only the significant public art, but also just the green space, the open space, and if there are plans to, have an open space plan or some other kind of plan, especially with more people moving into downtown. And it seems like we're not, maybe we are, and I don't know, reserving spots for future open spaces or parks or whatever.
So actually right now Parks is just in the beginning phases of putting out an RFP for a Parks master plan. They've done a needs assessment. We also are working on getting the design, mid-block design guidelines ready and really trying to think robustly about how we can, or mid-block walkways to integrate those as really interesting public spaces. At the same time, we also know that resources are an issue, and so we're going to have to look at where it may be feasible to do public-private partnerships, and that's something that I'll be working on as well. But I agree with you, and that is something that is definitely on our minds, that we want to make sure that as our downtown grows, there are places for people.
Anyone else?
Just to add to that a little bit, the downtown plan has a lot of direction for the future of public space and the public realm and park space, and I could go on.
Good stuff.
So there's a lot, but it does require more public-private partnership, as Laura suggested, that when we're thinking about great city making, it is not ever done by one entity, unless that one entity is has all the cards. And then it's probably not a very democratic process. So, and I think our Parks Department, we've been working very closely with them in the last few years to really, let's think about different ways to address needs for parks throughout the city, but certainly in the downtown where our land values are starting to rise much more dramatically, and acquisition of downtown property is going to become more challenging as our surface parking lots develop, which is what we want. But we have to think more strategically about how we create a larger framework for public space and the public realm, particularly park space and usable spaces for people throughout the downtown. So we need to think creatively about perhaps the land we already own and how we might better utilize that for people and plants.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
Okay, I think we're done. We're adjourned. Good night.